It began with Shatter Sanders taking most of the heat. Cleveland's local coverage seemed fixated on turning every minor misstep into a headline, while Dillon Gabriel coasted on a reputation for safe decision-making. But then the leak happened. A single clip, short, blurry, emotionally charged, spread fast. Gabriel's moment of frustration didn't show incompetence, but it didn't matter. Perception turned.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
The quarterback once seen as Cleveland's stabilizer became the newest target in a city that's always looking for one. This is the cycle. Cleveland builds up false hope, then weaponizes disappointment. The media script flips too fast for players to keep up, and internal chaos ensures that perception, not performance, decides a quarterback's fate. Gabriel didn't implode, the system around him did. And as Sanders slowly earns back credibility, it's clear that truth plays second to timing. In Cleveland, every season feels like déjà vu, because the real problem isn't on the field, it's in the culture that surrounds it. Dillon Gabriel didn't just get exposed, he got fed to the machine. A leaked sideline clip, a mic hot at the wrong moment, and within hours, the media that once praised his composure had turned on him with zero hesitation. 1 second, he was the calm, cerebral quarterback Cleveland desperately wanted to believe in. The next, he was the face of dysfunction. A meme. A punchline. And in true Cleveland fashion, the spin cycle started immediately, narratives reversed, and Gabriel became the problem. But the clip wasn't explosive. It wasn't even that deep. Gabriel, frustrated, likely after a busted route or bad read, visibly aired out some tension. That's it. In any other franchise, this is a non-story. A quarterback reacting in a tough moment. Human. But in Cleveland, it's headline fuel. It's all the media needed to light the match. This wasn't just a quarterback showing frustration, it was a turning point. Because the clip didn't go viral on accident. It went viral because the media was ready to flip. They'd already started to shift the narrative, and this clip gave them the perfect excuse. They'd been shielding Gabriel all season, conveniently overlooking his inconsistent throws, stalled drives, and underwhelming leadership. But once he showed even a crack, they jumped at it. And now he's been humiliated publicly, not for what he did, but for what he represents. Gabriel was never the long-term answer, but he was treated like one because he fit the story. The safe bet. The quiet worker. A guy who wouldn't challenge the locker room hierarchy or stir up headlines. He was palatable. And that made him media-friendly, until it didn't. Because while Gabriel was being cushioned from criticism, Shatter Sanders was being dragged. And not because of poor play. Not because of locker room issues. But because he didn't fit the script. From the moment he arrived, Sanders was labeled a risk. Too bold. Too vocal. Too flashy. The kind of quarterback who doesn't shrink from the spotlight, which, in Cleveland, apparently makes you a threat. And so the media made him one. Sanders became the target for every minor misstep. Facial expressions were dissected. Soundbites were twisted. He was painted as immature, a distraction, someone the franchise needed to keep in check. While Gabriel, he got the benefit of the doubt every single time. The double standard was loud. It was blatant. And it wasn't just about football. This wasn't a coincidence. This was Cleveland's media doing what they've always done, framing a season before it happens. Choosing a hero and a villain to keep the audience emotionally invested. But in doing so, they created a situation where the actual performance on the field was irrelevant. It was about narrative over nuance. About controlling perception rather than reporting reality. And then came the twist. The moment that clip of Gabriel leaked, the narrative imploded. The guy who was supposed to be above all that chaos suddenly looked rattled. And when the media turned, they turned hard. The same reporters who defended his every misfire were now running segments about his lack of leadership and emotional volatility. No one asked whether his frustration was warranted. No one questioned what systemic issues might have pushed him to that point. The clip became the only context that mattered. Meanwhile, Sanders was suddenly being praised for the same traits they used to criticize. His fire. His edge. his refusal to hide his emotions. The media pivoted fast, painting him as misunderstood rather than immature. And while the shift may have helped Sanders reclaim some respect, it didn't undo the damage that had already been done. Because this wasn't just about two quarterbacks. This was about a city and a franchise trapped in a cycle. Every year, Cleveland picks a new face of the future. They hype him up. The local media gets information. The fan base buys in. And when things inevitably go wrong, they scramble to find a fall guy. It's never the system. Never the leadership. It's always the player. The same formula year after year. Hype. Disappointment. Scapegoating. Reset. It's not just tiring, it's toxic. Gabriel didn't collapse under pressure. He cracked under expectation. Expectations that weren't built around actual football performance, but around fantasy. Around the idea that he could be the calm, controllable quarterback who wouldn't become part of the Cleveland chaos. And when he showed he was human, the illusion shattered. And the franchise let it happen. They didn't step in to clarify. They didn't protect their guy. They didn't manage the fallout. They watched as the media devoured him, just like they've done to every quarterback before him. Gabriel became the latest name in a long line of players built up only to be torn down when the season started going south. This isn't about talent. It's about culture. The Browns don't have a quarterback problem. They have a leadership problem. A structural problem. A media problem. One that allows narratives to become more powerful than game tape. One that enables emotional overreactions to become career-defining. And the fans, who've endured season after season of heartbreak, are conditioned to buy into it. Because they've been sold the same recycled dreams so many times, they've forgotten what real progress looks like. So now Gabriel is the scapegoat of the moment. And Sanders is suddenly being reconsidered. But make no mistake, if the system stays the same, it's only a matter of time before he's next. Because the media doesn't change. The organization doesn't adapt. They just rotate the spotlight. They choose new heroes. New villains. New soundbites to obsess over. And the players? They're left to clean up the damage. That's what this is really about. Not a clip. Not a sideline moment. But a system that keeps feeding on itself. One that can't distinguish between frustration and failure. One that turns young quarterbacks into content before it gives them a real shot to lead. And it's all being driven by the same forces. Weak leadership, sensationalist coverage, and a fan base that's been conditioned to crave the rise and fall more than the long, steady grind it takes to build a winning team. So yeah, Gabriel got humiliated. But he didn't humiliate himself. He got caught in a machine that doesn't care about truth. Only traction. And until someone inside that building finally stands up and says no more, the next guy is already doomed. If you're sick of watching Cleveland build quarterbacks up just to burn them down, hit the like button. Drop your thoughts below. Was Gabriel ever given a fair shot, or was this the plan all along? And if you want more raw breakdowns of the messy reality behind sports PR disasters, hit subscribe. Because in Cleveland, the stories change, but the dysfunction never does. You'd think by now Cleveland would get tired of writing the same tragic story. New quarterback, new hope, media frenzy, emotional whiplash, every single time. And somehow, the fans still show up like they haven't read this book before. Like this chapter might end differently. Like Dillon Gabriel might be the one to break the curse. Spoiler, he's not. Not because he couldn't be, but because no one could be not in this environment. Let's just call it what it is. Cleveland doesn't develop quarterbacks, it devours them. And Dillon Gabriel? He walked straight into the meat grinder. Framed as the golden boy from day one. The calm presence. The system guy. The anti-Sanders. The irony is brutal. Because for all the hype around his so-called composure, Gabriel became the face of dysfunction not through anything outrageous, but through a moment of humanity. A frustrated, sideline moment that got picked up, clipped, blasted on social media, and suddenly became the headline. That's all it takes in Cleveland. One leak, one meme, one quote taken slightly out of context, and the entire city turns. And once they turn, there's no coming back. The same local media that once protected Gabriel like a fragile franchise investment flipped the second it became convenient. Before that clip, Gabriel's poor throws were excused. His lack of production? Brushed off as growing pains. His awkward press conferences? Just rookie nerves. But after the clip? He's being talked about like a meltdown waiting to happen. Like he was never cut out for this in the first place. This isn't analysis. It's theater. Manufactured storylines dressed up as insight. Meanwhile, let's talk about Shatter Sanders. The guy who was actually showing growth. The guy who was putting in the work, stepping into leadership, staying focused, and still got painted as the diva. But because he didn't fit the mold. Because he had the nerve to walk into Cleveland with confidence, and the media doesn't like confidence unless they can claim credit for it. Sanders was vilified for the same traits that now have him being quietly rebranded as the more mature option. It's laughable. The same analysts who called him arrogant are now praising his fire. The same reporters who questioned his commitment are now quoting his leadership speeches in post-game interviews like they've been on his side the whole time. They weren't. They buried him. And they would have kept burying him if that Gabriel clip hadn't surfaced. That was the tipping point. The moment the media realized they needed a new face to sell to the fan base. And Sanders, conveniently, was already waiting in the wings, no longer the problem, but the solution. But nothing changed about Sanders. The only thing that changed was who the media needed him to be. That's how twisted this whole system is. The media doesn't cover the team, they cast it. They write roles. They assign narratives. And when the facts don't line up with the story, they rewrite the players. And the Browns organization? They just let it happen. Year after year. Because it's easier to roll with the media tide than to actually confront the dysfunction they've created. Let's not pretend this is isolated either. This exact pattern has played out so many times it's practically team tradition. Pick a quarterback. Build him up. Frame him as the savior. Get fans emotionally invested. Then once things start to wobble, bad game, bad interview, bad body language, let the media flip. Let the fan base sour. Blame the player. Move on to the next one. Rinse and repeat. Dillon Gabriel was just the next name on the list. And unless something changes, Shatter Sanders will be too. Because Cleveland doesn't just fail quarterbacks, it actively sets them up to fail. There's no stability. No consistent leadership. Just vibes and scapegoats. And what's worse? The players aren't allowed to respond. They can't call it out. They can't defend themselves. Because the second a player pushes back on the narrative, they get labeled as difficult, immature, not ready for the spotlight. So they stay quiet and let the story be written about them without them. It's suffocating. You think Gabriel doesn't know what's happening? You think he can't see the tide turning? He went from being sold as Cleveland's future to being memed as the guy who lost his cool in a meaningless preseason moment. That kind of shift doesn't just hurt your reputation, it kills your confidence. And what's the coaching staff doing? What's the front office doing? Nothing. Because they've been through this before. They've learned to let the media eat the player alive, just so they don't have to answer for the real problems, like why the offense has no identity, or why the locker room feels like a pressure cooker by week 3. Gabriel isn't the first quarterback Cleveland failed, and he won't be the last. But his case is unique because it shows how little it actually takes to fall out of favor. He didn't break the law. He didn't blow up on a coach. He didn't trash the city. He just had a moment of frustration. And in this ecosystem, that's all it takes. That's not a quarterback problem. That's a culture problem. And it's not just the media's fault. It's the organization enabling it. It's the leadership failing to protect their own players. It's the fans who keep buying into every recycled storyline like this time it'll end differently. Like this version of the script won't crash and burn like all the others. There's no accountability. No reflection. Just more damage control and a new savior in waiting. And the Browns keep wondering why they can't build long-term success? Because they're too busy selling short-term fantasies. At this point, Cleveland isn't a football team, it's a content farm. Churning out drama, controversy, and redemption arcs for players who are just trying to do their jobs. And when those players get swallowed up by the narrative, well, there's always another quarterback coming next season. Always another name to slap on the back of a jersey. Always another cycle to start. And all the while, the real issues, leadership, timing, trust, go unaddressed. The leaked Gabriel clip wasn't a meltdown. It was a mirror. It showed how fragile the system really is, how quickly the narrative can turn, and how little protection players have once they're no longer useful to the story being told. And Sanders? Don't get too comfortable. Because if Cleveland taught us anything, it's that being the hero one week doesn't stop you from being the villain the next. Yet, somehow, through all of this, the leaks, the narratives, the media contortions, people still ask why quarterbacks don't thrive in Cleveland. It's not a mystery. It's not even complicated. You can't build something lasting when the foundation shifts every week. You can't ask a rookie quarterback to lead a broken team while standing in the center of a spotlight that's looking for any reason to burn him. Dillon Gabriel didn't just walk into a franchise with a rough past. He walked into a full-blown identity crisis. Because that's what Cleveland football is at this point. A franchise so addicted to the idea of transformation, of finally turning the corner, that it never actually sits still long enough to do the work. And that's why Gabriel's fall wasn't shocking. It was inevitable. Not because of who he is, but because of what Cleveland has become. You saw it unfold in real time. One clip leaks. He's animated, clearly frustrated. That's it. No yelling at coaches. No equipment being thrown. No mutiny. Just raw emotion from a young quarterback trying to hold together a team that's already unraveling behind the scenes. That should have been a footnote. But in Cleveland, it became the main headline. That clip wasn't just used to criticize Gabriel, it was weaponized. A few seconds, stripped of context, amplified by media echo chambers desperate for a villain. And once that narrative took hold, the pile-on began. First came the local sports radio hosts. Suddenly they were questioning his mental toughness, his maturity, like they hadn't spent the past 2 months calling him the next Drew Brees. Then came the national takes, lazy segments on morning shows featuring analysts who hadn't watched a single Browns practice but knew the viral moment would get clicks. And then the worst part, the memes. It's the internet era's cruelest trick. When you go viral for the wrong reasons, your face stops being yours. It becomes a meme format, a punchline. And once that happens, the truth doesn't matter. Perception takes over. And while all this is happening to Gabriel, the team stays quiet. The coaching staff doesn't clarify the situation. The front office doesn't back him up. They don't push back on the spin. They let him twist in the wind, just like they've done with every quarterback before him. Because that's what Cleveland does. It creates a vacuum. And when things go wrong, and they always go wrong, the organization lets the media fill that vacuum with speculation, blame, and finger-pointing. Meanwhile, Shatter Sanders is watching all this unfold from the sideline, and suddenly the same people who tried to paint him as a locker room cancer are calling him a calming presence. The same commentators who questioned his leadership are now praising his resilience. And what changed? Nothing. Not really. Sanders didn't suddenly transform into a new player. He didn't deliver a game-winning touchdown or give a career-defining press conference. All that changed was the media's need for a new protagonist. Gabriel got dragged, so Sanders had to rise. It's a script. And they've run it so many times, they don't even try to hide it anymore. And this is what makes the whole situation feel so hollow. Because none of this is actually about football. It's about storytelling. It's about manipulating public perception to cover up deeper, systemic problems that have been festering inside this franchise for years. Let's talk about those problems. For starters, the coaching carousel never stops. You can't have a stable quarterback situation when you change offensive coordinators like it's a seasonal hire. Systems change, playbooks change, philosophies change, and quarterbacks are expected to keep up, adapt instantly, and deliver results now. That's not growth. That's survival. Then there's the front office. An ever-rotating cast of executives, each with their own blueprint, their own agenda, their own vision for the team's future. And guess who always gets caught in the middle of that turnover? The quarterback. By the time a player like Gabriel or Sanders settles in, the clock's already ticking on the next regime change. There's no long-term investment. Just short-term noise. And don't forget the fan base. Loyal to a fault. passionate in the most volatile way possible. These fans want to believe. They need to believe. And every time the team rolls out a new quarterback with a new narrative, they buy in. Because what else is there? But that belief, as pure as it may be, comes with a cost. Because the second the quarterback stumbles, that same energy flips. That's the dangerous part of being the face of the franchise in Cleveland. You're never just a player. You're a symbol of hope, of change, of failure, of everything this city wants but hasn't been able to hold on to. And that weight? It crushes people. Dillon Gabriel didn't fail because he wasn't talented enough. He didn't implode because of one sideline moment. He got caught in a system designed to eat its own. A system that doesn't just lack patience, it lacks honesty. Because let's be real, the Browns haven't been honest with themselves in years. They haven't taken accountability for how much damage they do by cycling through quarterbacks like they're replaceable parts. They haven't acknowledged how their failure to protect players from the media spotlight turns minor issues into career-defining controversies. And they definitely haven't reckoned with how their leadership vacuum creates an environment where the only consistent thing is chaos. And yet, every offseason, they sell the same dream. New season, new quarterback, new era. But what's really changed? They'll say it's a new culture. That this time, they're building something sustainable. That the drama is behind them. But the second someone leaks a clip, or a player shows emotion, or the team drops 2 games in a row, the cycle resets. Because this isn't about one quarterback. It never was. This is about a franchise stuck in a self-made loop. A loop of hype, meltdown, and reset. A loop where talent is wasted, narratives rule, and leadership hides behind spin. And so Gabriel will likely fade out of the picture. Not because he can't play, but because the story has already moved on without him. Sanders will step into the spotlight again, until he becomes inconvenient. Until the media finds their next headline. Until the pressure mounts and the cycle starts again. And through it all, Cleveland will keep asking why things never change. They'll blame the players. They'll blame the locker room. They'll blame the fans. But they'll never look in the mirror. If you're tired of the same old story with a new name slapped on it, hit the like button. Drop a comment. What needs to happen for this franchise to finally break the cycle? And if you want more breakdowns of the messy machine behind the headlines, make sure you're subscribed. Because as long as Cleveland keeps writing tragedies, someone has to keep reading the fine print.